They bullied him in school, mercilessly, relentlessly. Every day was a battlefield he never signed up for, where laughter wasn't joy but cruelty, and silence wasn't peace but suffocating isolation. His name was Ethan, a boy who never fit in with the others. Too quiet, too thoughtful, too unwilling to bend himself into the loud and careless mold that seemed to define popularity. His clothes weren't brand new, his shoes were scuffed, and his only refuge was the library where he hid at lunch, pretending he was just engrossed in books when really he was escaping. They found him anyway. They always did. Lockers slammed in his face, homework stolen and scribbled with insults, whispers echoing down hallways that he was worthless, weak, nothing. One day, they shoved him into a puddle outside the gym, and when he stood dripping wet, shivering, the laughter rang louder than the school bell. That night, he stared into the mirror at the bruises and thought he would never escape them. Not the pain, not the shame, not the names burned into his skin like scars. But time moves as it always does, and eventually Ethan left that school, that town, those tormentors behind. He carried their cruelty with him, though, like heavy stones tied to his chest. For years, he struggled. Jobs that barely paid the bills, apartments with peeling walls, nights haunted by memories of laughter that still stung. Yet underneath that pain grew something else: resolve. He didn't want pity. He wanted power. He wanted to stand in front of the world, in front of them, and prove he was not what they said he was. 15 years later, Ethan was not the same boy they remembered. The quiet, skinny kid had become a man sharp with determination and success. He had built himself from the ground up, working harder than anyone, sacrificing sleep, comfort, even joy. Now he stood tall, dressed in a tailored suit, driving a car that turned heads, living in a home others only dreamed about. But more than wealth, he carried knowledge. He knew exactly who had broken him all those years ago, and he knew where to find them. The reunion invitation arrived on a rainy Thursday. 15 years since graduation. A chance to reconnect, reminisce, and relive old memories. Ethan smiled at the words, the bitter taste of irony filling his mouth. Reconnect? Reminisce? He had nothing to reminisce about but pain. But relive? Yes. He would relive it, but differently. This time, the power would be his. When he walked into the school gym, now decorated with balloons and banners, heads turned. People whispered, just as they always had, but not with mockery this time, with curiosity, even admiration. Ethan had changed so completely that some didn't recognize him. His shoulders were broad, his expression calm but commanding, and his presence filled the room. He could feel their eyes on him, measuring him against the boy they once mocked. And then he saw them, the ringleaders, the ones who had made his life a misery. Jake, the star athlete who used to shove him against lockers. Melissa, the queen bee who had laughed the loudest. Chris, who had spread rumors so vicious Ethan once begged his mother not to send him to school. They were all here, though they didn't shine as brightly anymore. Jake's once muscular frame had softened. Melissa's confident smile carried cracks. Chris's eyes looked tired, burdened. Life had touched them, too, though Ethan felt no sympathy. When they recognized him, shock spread across their faces. Melissa gasped. Jake's smirk faltered. Chris muttered something under his breath. They hadn't expected him to come, hadn't expected him to be this. Successful, powerful, untouchable. They approached him hesitantly, masking discomfort with false friendliness. Ethan? Wow, you look different, Melissa said, her voice sugar-coated but thin. Jake clapped him on the back, trying to laugh. Man, look at you. You really, made it. Ethan smiled politely, but inside, the boy they had broken stirred with something fierce. He didn't lash out, didn't shout, didn't stoop to their level. No, his revenge was quieter, sharper, more cutting than fists or insults could ever be. He spoke calmly, each word carefully measured, each success casually revealed. He owned businesses. He had influence. He had become everything they had once told him he would never be. And as he spoke, He watched their faces pale, their bravado collapse. The best revenge, he realized, wasn't humiliating them the way they had humiliated him. It was standing there, living proof that he had survived, that he had risen higher than they ever could have imagined. They had tried to destroy him, but all they had done was forge the steel in his spine. By the end of the night, it was clear. The balance of power had shifted. The bullies were no longer towering giants in his memory. They were small, fragile, ordinary. Ethan left the reunion with a quiet satisfaction burning in his chest. He didn't need their apologies, their regret, or even their acknowledgement. His very existence, his success, was the revenge he had waited 15 years to claim. And as he stepped into the night, the cool air against his face, he smiled. Not the smile of a boy broken, but of a man who had taken back everything they tried to steal. The laughter of the past no longer haunted him. It only reminded him how far he had come, and how sweet revenge could be when it came not from destruction, but from becoming unstoppable. They bullied him in school, day after day, year after year, until the laughter became chains around his throat. Ethan never forgot the fists, the kicks, the way Jake once shoved his face into the mud until he couldn't breathe, while the others stood around cheering. He never forgot Melissa's voice, sharp as glass, calling him worthless as she ripped up his homework and tossed it into the trash. Or Chris, who filmed Ethan's humiliation one winter afternoon when they stripped him down to his underwear and locked him outside in the snow. He remembered the cold that cut to his bones, the tears that froze on his cheeks, the silence of teachers who looked the other way. He left school shattered. But scars, if fed long enough, become something else. They become purpose. And Ethan fed them every single day for 15 years. While others laughed, drank, and wasted time, he studied. He trained his mind, sharpened it like a blade. He built businesses, connections, influence. And in the darker corners of his life, he learned other skills. How to intimidate, how to break a man without leaving marks, how to destroy someone not just with fists but with fear. By the time the reunion came, Ethan was not just successful. He was dangerous. The gym smelled the same as it had years ago, cheap floor polish and faint sweat. But now it was decorated with balloons, banners, cheap nostalgia. Ethan walked in, his presence commanding silence as heads turned. The boy they once ridiculed now wore power like armor. Melissa nearly dropped her glass of wine when she saw him. Jake's jaw went slack. Chris looked like he had seen a ghost. They tried to greet him with awkward smiles, nervous laughter. "Ethan, man, you look incredible. So good to see you again," Jake said, his old swagger cracking. Melissa touched his arm with a too bright smile. "We were just kids back then, you know? Everyone was stupid in high school." Ethan's smile was cold. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let silence stretch, let their discomfort grow, let the fear creep in. Then he spoke, his voice low, steady. "Yes, kids. But I remember everything." That night, he didn't settle for proving his success. That wasn't enough. He had waited too long, carried too much. He wanted them to feel what he had felt. Powerless, humiliated, broken. It started subtly. He whispered a few words to the event organizer, paid off, loyal to Ethan now, and suddenly the lights in the gym flickered out. When they came back on, a video was playing on the giant projector screen. Grainy clips, photos, moments they thought were long forgotten. Jake shoving Ethan into a locker, Melissa laughing as he cried, Chris's cruel video of him shivering in the snow. Every torment, every humiliation, displayed for the entire reunion to see. The room went silent. The laughter died in their throats. People turned on the bullies, whispering, staring with disgust. Their reputations shattered in minutes. Melissa's face burned crimson as she tried to explain, but the more she spoke, the more hollow she sounded. Jake cursed under his breath, fists clenched, but no one stepped in to defend him. Chris looked like he wanted to disappear. But Ethan wasn't finished. After the video ended, he approached them one by one. He leaned close to Jake, his voice like a knife. "Do you remember the mud? I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. Tonight, you will remember what it feels like to choke." Jake's face drained of color. Ethan didn't touch him. He didn't need to. The threat, the memory, the sudden awareness that Ethan could ruin him even further was enough to make the once mighty athlete stumble away like a child. To Melissa, he said softly, "You thought words didn't leave scars. Look around. Every single person here now knows what you really are. Every smile you fake will remind you of this moment. You will never escape it." And Chris, Ethan simply slipped a small USB drive into his hand. "I kept copies," he said, his eyes burning into him. "If I ever see your name near mine, in business, in politics, in life, I will release them all. Think carefully about your next move." The reunion was ruined. The bullies, once the kings and queens of the school, left early, humiliated, broken, haunted by the shadows of their past. Ethan stood alone in the gym, the weight of years finally lifting. His revenge wasn't just success. It wasn't just showing them he had survived. It was turning their own cruelty against them, making them choke on the poison they once fed him. As he walked into the night, the cool air wrapped around him like a cloak. He didn't smile, didn't laugh. He only breathed, deeply, freely. For the first time in 15 years, the chains were gone. And behind him, his bullies carried the chains now, chains they would never shake off. 15 years had passed, but Ethan never forgot. The laughter, the fists, the cold nights of humiliation, they were carved into him like brands. Every bruise had healed, but the memories never did. Instead, they hardened him, reshaped him into something unrecognizable. When the reunion invitation arrived, he didn't see it as nostalgia. He saw it as opportunity. For years, he had prepared. He had money, power, and more importantly, he had a plan. The gym was packed with old faces, most softened by time. When Ethan walked in, silence rippled through the room. No one could ignore him now. His presence was like a storm, sharp suit, steady eyes, a kind of quiet intensity that made people step aside without knowing why. And then he saw them. Jake, Melissa, Chris. The triumvirate of his torment. They laughed awkwardly when they first approached him, trying to act as if nothing had happened. Melissa touched his arm, her smile brittle. Jake clapped him on the shoulder, his grip uncertain. Chris barely looked him in the eye. They didn't know yet. They had no idea what he had planned. The video was just the beginning. The lights cut out, and when they flickered back, the projector played every memory Ethan had collected. Jake holding him down in the mud, Melissa spitting insults, Chris's cruel footage in the snow. The room turned on them instantly. Whispers, gasps, disgust. Their reputations collapsed in seconds. But Ethan wasn't satisfied. Humiliation was too easy. He wanted them to feel fear, the same helpless fear he had felt as a boy. When the reunion ended, most people left, murmuring about the scandal. But Jake, Melissa, and Chris found themselves invited. Ethan himself handed them cards with an address. His voice was calm, steady, inescapable. "Come. Tonight. We need to talk." They shouldn't have gone. But curiosity, pride, maybe guilt, it pulled them in. Hours later, the three of them stood outside an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, its windows shattered, its walls covered in rust and silence. Inside, Ethan was waiting. The door locked behind them with a heavy clang. The air smelled of oil and dust. Chains hung from beams above. A single light bulb flickered, casting long shadows. Ethan stepped forward slowly. "Do you remember me now?" Jake tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. "Come on, man. This is crazy. It was high school, we were kids." "Kids." Ethan's voice cut him down like a blade. "Do you know what kids can do? They can kill. They nearly killed me." Melissa backed away, trembling. "We're sorry." "Sorry?" Ethan's eyes burned. "Sorry doesn't erase the nights I prayed I wouldn't wake up. Sorry doesn't erase the years I bled for every ounce of respect I now have. Sorry is worthless." He moved with precision, almost ritual. Chains rattled as he bound Jake's wrists, forcing him to his knees. Melissa screamed, but Ethan's glare silenced her. Chris tried to bolt, but the locked door stopped him cold. He didn't need weapons, not at first. He had fear. He circled them, speaking softly, almost gently, recounting each cruelty, every humiliation, forcing them to remember, forcing them to relive it. Then came the games. Jake, the star athlete, once so strong, Ethan forced him to crawl across the floor, dragging chains behind him, gasping under their weight. "You made me kneel in front of everyone once," Ethan whispered. "Now it's your turn." Melissa, the queen bee, he held a mirror in front of her face under the harsh bulb. "You cared only about appearances. How do you look now? Do you still see a queen? Or do you see what you are, a coward?" Chris, the cameraman of cruelty, Ethan strapped a small camera to his head, forcing him to film everything. "You made my pain entertainment. Tonight, you record your own." The nights stretched long. Every scream echoed in the empty warehouse, swallowed by walls that had seen worse. Ethan never struck them down with fatal blows. He didn't need to. His revenge wasn't death. It was breaking them piece by piece, until they were nothing but hollow echoes of the bullies they had once been. By dawn, when he finally opened the door, they stumbled out, bloody, shaking, broken. They would never speak of what happened. They couldn't. No one would believe them. And even if they did, Ethan's influence would bury their voices. As the sun rose, Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them scatter like frightened children. For 15 years he had carried their cruelty. Now, at last, he had given it back. And as silence returned to the warehouse, Ethan smiled, not out of joy, but out of release. The boy they had broken was gone. In his place stood a man forged in fire, a man who had taken revenge so complete it would haunt them until their final breath. They bullied him in school. 15 years later, he came back, and he made sure they would never forget.